Hey guys, so I have just finished watching The Circle, the Emma Watson movie. I don't know if they've made a new version of the Circle. I'm not entirely sure, but I wanted to go ahead and get my thoughts out about this film before I really looked at anyone else's opinion of it. I know that other people don't like it. That's really all I know. I know the film is not well regarded. But just full disclosure, I read the book not too long ago, and I'm going to be talking about the book in addition to the film because I think I really can't talk about it any other way. I can't just forget the book because I went into it with high expectations, and I think since the film is so philosophical and so is the book, I kind of have to talk about it in those terms and compare them to each other. So, I read the Circle book, and it's really weird because The Circle is one of those books that, as a read, as a story, it's not particularly compelling in a lot of it, the story elements, what's happening, especially since in the book there's a lot of stupid romance plots that get thrown in seemingly for no reason. That stuff is not particularly compelling, I don't think. But the philosophical implications of The Circle, I think, make it one of the most important books of the 21st century. And I know that sounds strange to say because the movie was just panned. I could see it in the Rotten Tomatoes scores. But I consider that book to be one of the most important books of the 21st century just because the thing I love about the book is that the ending is sort of portrayed as triumphant, but you know that it isn't. You know that there's all these parts of it that are really fucked up, and in the world's going in a bad direction. However, it's not really a totally bad direction because a lot of the things they do in The Circle are good. A lot of the things they do in The Circle are really awesome. But it's just how do you toe that line? That's the whole thing about this book. It doesn't feel like it gives you a clear answer. And it's not ambiguous for the sake of being ambiguous, which if you've watched any of my videos before where I talk about these kinds of stories that are ambiguous for the sake of being ambiguous just tend to drive me fucking crazy. I hate when people do that and it's ambiguous, therefore it's clever. No, it isn't, actually. Sometimes you need to actually know what you're saying, and if you don't know what you're saying, and you make the film ambiguous to get out of criticism of your story, I just think that's really annoying. But The Circle has a really good reason to be ambiguous, and that's because we don't know what the future holds when it comes to technology. But there's some good things, there's some bad things, but you don't really know how to draw the line. It's not you have to pick a side. Is it good or bad? It's ambiguous, and it could be the best thing in the world or the worst thing in the world, and that's what's so scary about it, and that's what I love about the Circle book. And so when I watch this, I'm are they going to be able to have a film that captures that ambiguity? Not just ambiguity as in I wonder what happened, but ambiguity as in is this a triumphant thing or is this a horrifying thing, right? And while the film does not do it 100% like I would have imagined, I think it still does it well enough. I think it's serviceable. I think it's a good film for that reason. What I would have really liked in the ending of the film is to have May ascend at the company and have the film end on a shot of her just smiling into the crowd and everyone loves her, and it's portrayed as a triumphant ending, but really you're oh shit, this is so bad. Which you don't really see that in films very often, where it's it feels great but it isn't. That's something when I read the ending of The Circle that I was oh man, that's so good. I want to see that used as a device more often, where the film is portrayed as having this really great ending, but inside that it's exactly the opposite of that. So, but it was portrayed well enough. I have to, if I'm going to talk about this film, I have to talk about the elephant in the room. Okay, Emma Watson's accent was not good in this film. I don't know why they picked her. I don't think she brought anything particularly good to the table. I mean, she's a good actress, She's good at what she does, of course. A lot of people look at people who were in famous things like Harry Potter and are so you're just a Harry Potter actor doing other things now. No, I think she's on her own 2 feet. She's a really good actor. But she did not pull off this accent at all. And they should have just probably picked an American actress to do it. I don't know why they picked her. I mean, they picked her because she's a big name, which is something that's always irritating to me. Because that always tells me, like, if you can't sell the film on it being that good, and you have to you have to have an all-star cast to sell the film, that tells me that the film can't stand on its own 2 feet. Because think about how many films cast actors who were relatively unknown at the time and became huge. Just to name one of them, Star Wars. Star Wars had a lot of... The main characters in the main cast weren't particularly well known at the time. And ironically, Harry Potter did the same thing. You know, and of course there were seasoned actors in Star Wars and Harry Potter too. I mean, it's not like they didn't do that at all. But I mean, there have been films that have gotten very popular that cast relatively unknown actors. So when you have to cast an actor who, like, is a big name and actively kind of the casting takes away from the film, that makes me think that you didn't have very much confidence in it. So that's annoying. I don't really know why people give this film a bad score. Because maybe it's because when I watched the film going into it, I expected it to be kind of like a thoughtful, intellectually challenging film that was not like, this is a really cool story of this girl who goes and works at this company and, like, it's amazing, and it's like I wasn't expecting that because I read the book, and maybe, you know, the book is filling in the gaps that the movie didn't establish. I personally think that a lot of the other stuff they took out of the film, like the romantic subplot, like, that didn't fucking need to be there. I'm glad they took that out. It was really annoying that it was in the book in the first place. And the way they kind of wrapped it all up was pretty clever. Because if you think about it, in the book, the whole thing was, I think Annie had, like, an accident or something, and May was thinking, like, if only we could read her thoughts. And then that was, like, the end of it. But even when I was watching the film, like, towards the beginning, I'm like, okay, reading your thoughts is kind of far-fetched in this film. I mean, that's a big leap. Because when you have a visual medium and you're trying to sell something, you can't have something... They didn't want it to just be sci-fi. They wanted it to be grounded in the real world. So all the stuff in the film looked like stuff that we really could have had in the real world. It just looked like maybe this was a decade down the line or something like that. So, you know, and then at the end, you know, having it be where the main 2 guys were, I know I'm jumping all over the place. I'm talking about the ending now, but I'm just getting my thoughts out about the film. The main 2 guys at the circle, having them be accountable, and having that play as a moment like, aha, we've finally taken down the company. It's like, no, May thought, well, we just need to make it better. That's the scary part about technology, right? Is that she saw what happened, but rather than thinking, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, she thought, we just need to make it better. Even realizing that the 2 people who were in charge were, like, not being held accountable themselves, but that was just part of her delusion that everyone needs to be held accountable all the time, every minute of every day. It wasn't this accountability is getting to their head, and that's the problem. It's that, no, they just weren't transparent. That was the problem, right? That's a good ambiguous ending right there. That's you know, having it be a triumphant moment where those 2 guys are taken down, but it's like you never really see what they were trying to do, which is another good thing. You don't really see, like, oh, this is what they were secretly planning to do the whole time, because they totally could have done that. Been like, it looks like these guys were just doing this thing for their own personal gain, and they didn't really care about this. We didn't get any kind of reveal like that about what they were trying to do. It was just like, they were like, oh shit, we gotta get out of here. And then May's like, yep, and that just proves it, that we just need more accountability. That's good. That's really good. And that, you know, there was this whole fucking plot in the book with a shark, and and like the romantic plots and all the stuff getting revealed and it being a secret, and you know, May not knowing who the guy was at first and it being like a big old thing, and it was streamlined, a lot of it. So I did like that. It's weird because I don't know if this is a film I would just show to people at like a gathering, because I don't know that it'd be particularly fun for people to watch. But this is definitely something I would show in a philosophy class. Like if I was teaching a philosophy class and we were talking about the implications of technology, and I didn't, you know, if I was in a position where I wasn't just going to assign a book to my students about this, I would show them this movie if we didn't have much time left, and I was like, yeah, this captures the essence of that well enough. So I like that, and I don't think any amount of Emma Watson not being able to say "wanted" very well is gonna wreck that. It's like I don't know, this weird atmosphere kind of hangs over the whole film where you don't really know how to feel about it, which is fantastic. That's how it should be. You can't really get a solid read on it. Like, oh, this is the moment where this is the funny part, this is the sad part. It's like it's all kind of happening at once, and it feels like you can't really control any of it. I mean, it's a film, so you can't, but you get what I mean, right? You feel like you have no solid way of determining the path forward. There are just very subtle things in the film that I think were explicitly laid out in the book, which worked well for a book medium, but they didn't really need to go into full detail. So, for example, you see May, like, you keep going back to her workstation, and at the end, she just has, like, 7 monitors in front of her. And it's not like, man, I feel like I can't keep up with all this work, but I really should just keep going for the sake of the circle. You get a lot of that in the book. In the film, it's just like, she's got 7 monitors in front of her. You're like, what the hell? This is insane. You see her friend, I think, who's Karen Gillan, I think. I mean, I'm almost certain that's Karen Gillan. I mean, if it's not Karen Gillan, it's Karen Gillan. You see her friend, who's just, like, constantly getting so overwhelmed. I think the part where they're in the bathroom talking together, I don't really know that part landed particularly well. I don't think it did. It didn't really seem to. It seemed kind of unearned. It seemed like maybe we skipped a few pages of script there, so that was kind of weird. And then her ending up back home, taking time away. It's just, that's something that probably could have been trimmed, because it was like, it seemed like she was getting jealous of May, but then she just kind of quit the company, so that was kind of weird. It's like she was trying to help her there as a newbie, and then she started ascending in the company, and then she just took time away. I think maybe that arc should have been a little bit less rapid, like a little bit less extreme. Maybe she could have gotten a little jealous, and then she's like, oh my god, I'm getting jealous. This is so stupid. I just need to take time away from this. Maybe something like that would have been a little better. It was kind of a weird relic of the book, I think, not going into full detail there. But whatever. It didn't really... I think it was still salvaged. The thing with Mercer, I think that was done better in the film than in the book, because in the book, May was just kind of like toying with Mercer, like, come out, Mercer, wherever you are, and like her voice coming from the drone and stuff, which that seemed so mean. It was part of May just being like inexplicably the most sometimes, being like kind of dumb, kind of just not really dumb, but just like randomly being like unintentionally evil a lot of the time. May seemed much more of a relatable character, so when she's talking to Mercer and she's like, Mercer, hey, don't freak out, we're your friends, and then he fucking crashes into the thing and just traumatizes her, that seemed that was really well done. And then having her come back from it and think like, we just need to add more of this technology, that seemed believable. That seemed way more believable in the film than it did in the book, I think. It seemed like she was just a real person there. She tried to discourage people from finding Mercer. They wanted to find him, and she was like, no, we don't need to do that. And they were like, yeah. So she's like, okay. And then they found him, and then he fucking crashed over the edge of a platform. So, well done, movie. That was more believable. What else? Again with Tom Hanks in the movie. He was fine. Part of those crowd scenes, like when they had the crowd at the circle kind of cheering for them, that seemed really fake a lot of the time. Like, they were just like, he would say something that wasn't particularly funny and people would just erupt with laughter. Like, they were kind of building this group dynamic that didn't really seem to be there. It seemed like they were like selling this fake fun. Like, ha 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 ha, it's our leader, he's so charismatic. I like Tom Hanks, but they probably should have chosen someone else. Again, it kind of seeming like another big name actor that didn't really need to be in that role. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I'm gonna be really. It's I don't want to think of it this way, but I am gonna be really curious to see why people panned this film, because I think for what it's trying to do, I think it does it just fine. And maybe that's kind of a hacky thing to say, you know, for what it is, it's really good. Like, I know people always say that. Like, well, it's good for what it is. Like, what the hell does that mean? Right? I want it to be something good, and it's not. But really, I think this is a really different kind of film, especially because The Circle is a really different kind of book. It's a cautionary tale, but it's not cautionary in that George Orwell kind of way. This is like, you know, in the George Orwell novels, it's like things start out well and then they go terrible. And it's like, aha, but if we do this, this will happen. The Circle's not really like that. The Circle's like, this is an extension of what we already have, and here's a bunch of ways it could go really well, and here's a bunch of ways it could go really terrible. And we don't know what's going to happen, so you should think about these kinds of things, but it's also really scary. It does not leave you in a place where you're like, I feel satisfied with that story. You know, but it also doesn't leave you in a place where you feel like, oh, it was so ambiguous, I don't know what's going on. It's very unique in that way. And I honestly didn't know if the film was going to be able to capture that, and it totally did. And it cut out a lot of the things that I really hated about the book. That made it hard to get through. But, you know, there were things I hated that they did, too. Not that I hated, but that I hated that they did, you know. Like casting Emma Watson in that role when she didn't need to be in that role. And not paying a lot of attention to the group dynamics there. You know, so, you know, a little bit of tightening on the acting and the response of the crowd, maybe a little bit better editing there, and maybe it's a couple different actors. I mean, casting someone who's not Emma Watson. I mean, because the thing is, May is supposed to be kind of like an every woman, you know? Kind of be like, so casting like a really recognizable actor in that role anyway, even if they had the best acting and the best American accent of all time. I don't even know what the hell that means. But just casting someone like that who was really good, I think casting a big-name actor was a huge mistake. So maybe, you know, casting those roles a little bit differently, casting people that, you know, are not big-name people, but just, you know, people, an actress that someone can kind of insert themselves into the role, that'd be great. What else? Is there anything I really need to say besides that? The drones seemed surprisingly ominous in this. I will say, too, it's really weird how a lot of the dialogue feels ripped right out of the book. When it probably should have been changed just for the medium. Because it's like, okay, that works on the page. But when, like, Karen Gillan was like, it's high nerd. Like, that just, it didn't really seem to work. It was like, that doesn't seem like something people would just say. They didn't really seem to have that kind of personality where they'd be just using those like Twitter and Tumblr phrases like in the middle of their sentences. They didn't really seem like those kinds of characters. They changed them a little bit for how the movie was. So just having Karen Gillan say it's high nerd, like it was like, huh, you know. But you know, they didn't a lot of the mystery around like who were the founders and stuff. They just cut that stuff right out, and I think it worked just fine. I wonder, and I know I've already said this, but it's just, think of all the films that were just kind of ruined by bad marketing. Was this one of those films that was just like ruined by bad marketing? I don't know. I bet you if you showed someone this film, either didn't tell them anything about it, or just told them like, this is a very kind of intellectually challenging film. This is one of those films that's like, you watch it and it just gives you something to think about. If you showed them that, if you didn't tell them that and you just showed it to them, I think they would like it. I do. And they would probably say, huh, that was really interesting. That's, you know, kind of like a TED Talk. You know, that's what it is. The Circle is basically like a TED Talk. You know? You don't watch it to come away and say, oh my God, that was Oscar worthy. It was beautiful. I cried. You know, it's not that kind of film. I'm just going on and on about this. But I might do a separate video. But seriously, if you've watched this film, you haven't read The Circle book, read The Circle. It's such an important story, I think. In that same way that people say that like Animal Farm or Lord of the Flies is an important story, I think like The Circle is like the Lord of the Flies of the technology era. You know, it really is. They could have used a couple more passes with the editing too. Also, I'll say this: May in the movie is much more likable and much less just, I'm sorry to say this, but she's just a dumbass in the book. I kind of said she wasn't a dumbass earlier, but in some ways she is. Like, I guess in the movie, her going out on the kayak seemed more excusable because we saw her doing it, and it was like just she was having a moment where she felt lost. Could have been sold a little better, but in the the way they had that whole thing going in the Circle book, with May going out there, it just seems so out of nowhere, and it seems so random. And I'm glad they didn't do it. So it's like all those things kind of seem to be filled in. Oh, I will say this: the scene where the two, like, it plays very much like a college campus recruitment, right? Where those two younger employees of the Circle, like the girl and the guy, they come to talk to May about how she hasn't set up her social profile. That was well done, because that was the most memorable scene in the book to me, because that was so creepy. Just their passive-aggressive, oh, you went kayaking? I go kayaking. Well, I'm not saying, these events are all voluntary, but it's just we're worried about your participation with the company. So maybe, you left at this time and you came back at this time. Maybe you could have spent some of that time with some of our groups. Why didn't you do that? You're such an anomaly because we don't know anything about you. That is fucking creepy. And, they captured that. It didn't have quite the same amount of, and I didn't like when they started the dramatic moment, the music in that moment, because I didn't think it needed it. I think like the internal uncomfortableness of the discomfort, I guess is the word, of the audience, it works better. But it was fine. It worked decently well. It worked pretty well, actually, I think. So, The Circle with Emma Watson, directed by somebody who got Karen Gillan and Tom Hanks. This is the first film where I've noticed so many people in the film that I just like, oh, I know that person. Yeah. Check it out if you haven't. I don't know why you're still watching this if you haven't checked it out. But yeah, The Circle. I thank you for watching this, and I will see you guys next time. Those are my thoughts. Bye-bye.